we just were told yesterday to download this Teams thing. This is really neat.
Yeah, it's really good. Cool. I'll get started then. So, I do the part where I take text files and input them into MMIS. I do add cases and update. So, it might be already existing or I have to add it to MMIS. And depending on the case file, if it has a PA number or not. So here it doesn't have a PA number, which would be before this line break. So this would be an add case. And if it does have a PA number, which is, let me find one right here, then it's an update case. So this already exists. So then I want to show you, so this is like the main, just like this is the main file. So this holds the framework. Did you get to the framework part of the UiPath training yet?
I'm still in the beginning. I'm still in the beginning stages of the training still.
Okay.
So they went over the flow charts all day. I mean, it's straightforward how you initiate and create the loop. So it's not that bad.
So you'll get to the framework part. So the framework is just really good because it has all the pieces already there, kind of, and you just put it together and then code the part you need to code. So for example, it already includes getting the configuration file loaded and set up. So I'll open that up real quick. So this is the framework here. So it goes to initialization. So this part is, I'll open it up later, but it's where it reads the config files, opens up to terminal, the MMIS system, and sets that up. And then here, get transaction data is where it pulls each of the files in that input folder, which is, I showed you, yeah, you're in the meeting the other day.
Yeah, could you go over that? So when it comes to these files, are they put in there by another process?
I think so, yeah. It's put in there by that other process, or it's put in there manually, but I'm guessing it's going to be automated with the KeyPros process.
Okay, so it's not like another UiPath program that does create those files. It's something else that KeyPro is generating out of their application and putting this file into everything. Okay.
Exactly. So they're going to be putting the files in here, and then the bot will will check what files are in that folder, the input files folder, and then run through each of them. So that's what get transaction data does. It opens up each of them, and then get transaction data moves one case file at a time, and then it'll process it here. And then when it's done, it'll go back to get transaction data. Get transaction data looks for the next file if it exists, and it keeps going this loop until there's no more files, and then it ends it. And this is where MMIS is closed, and the reports. I mean, the reports are saved each here, but I think there's one saved in here. But this is where it just closes MMIS, and then everything ends. So I'll open up init real quick. It's not really important because this is just part of the framework that you'll see. So init all settings. So this is where it opens up that configuration file where it looks at the paths of the folders and what credentials being used. So for example, this is the config file that it reads, name, value, and then what happens in this is it pulls it as a dictionary. I think someone waiting again here. Yeah. Hey, Steve, we already started. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Sorry, I was late.
It's okay. So I'll keep going. So it pulls in as a dictionary. So this is the key. This is the value. And then you can use these variables later in the process. That's what it's for. So you don't have to hard code anything. You can change them easily here, and it'll change elsewhere in the code. And that's just a dictionary called config that it pulls out. We can see it here. It's loading.
And these were all listed in your documentation, right? Where the config files at, the network and all stuff. Okay.
Yeah. So my thing just froze. Hello. Oh, okay. So out config. So this is like, it's already, when you download the framework from UiPath, this is already there. So I just call it config, and that's just a dictionary. And then the next thing is it kills MIS if there already is one open, because you don't want two open or it's going to have an error. And then this is the one I created, so this is important. Get files. I'll open it up. So this is the file, get files. And all this does is just look at the, so this creates a new list real quick. And then all it does is looks at the folder that is called MIS input path, which is here. So it looks at this folder for each file for item in the directory. Add the file to the list of file paths. And then I'll go back. So then it outs the file paths, so out file paths, and I use that later in the process. And then init all applications opens up MMIS and logs in for me. First, it gets the credential, and as you see, it uses the asset name from the config file, MMIS creds, which is here. And this is the name of the credential in Orchestrator. So it pulls the username and password based on this name, and then gets the username and password, logs in. This is like just something they have to do, but you won't really ever have to change this. So
it's just going through each field and filling it in with the file.
For the logging, yeah. This is just
okay.
Login, yeah. Username and password. Puts X in all the right forms that it has to put X in to get to the right place to actually start entering data. And then I just press enter. So you will never have to touch any of this. Really, the init part is just so you know in case anything really crazy happens, but it shouldn't. So then if we go back to the sequence, open up. Okay. So that was init. It just sets everything up. So I'll get to get transaction data. So there's a lot of like if and like try catches in here, but it's all in the framework, so it's all pretty self-explanatory when you go through the training part of that. So get transaction data, I'll open up that file real quick. And like I said, all get transaction data is pulls one at a time, the file. So remember the file path. So this is the list of files that we found. And in transaction number, this is a transaction number that is saved as a integer, and all it does is increment 1 every time it goes through this file, and that means that we can use it to actually check if there's any file paths left. If there is, then make the transaction item the next file path. I'll open this up real quick. So it could be because it's a list, transaction number starts at 1, it's transaction number -1, and it gets the element, the next file path. And then if there's no more left, then it's nothing, then it automatically sets everything as nothing, and then it'll know here. Actually, I think it's not here. So no data, it goes to end process here, you can see. So if there's nothing, it just doesn't do anything. But if there is something left, then it goes to process, which is the main juicy part of this whole thing, which is here. So it's in the try catch, so that goes through the process file. If anything happens that shouldn't happen outside of the try catch inside process, then it'll catch the error here, because if it doesn't catch the error, then the whole process breaks and it doesn't go to the next file, so that's not good. Really quickly, I'll go through what the catch is. So there's 2 catches: business exception, which is something that I can throw and it'll go in here, and then there's something called system exception, which is something I don't anticipate, and it's just caught in here. They're both identical in the sequence of the catches. It'll build the table, add the row of data, which is, I'll show you here, timestamp, the case ID, the PA number if there is one, the transaction item, which is the file path, and edit codes if there are any, and the error, source and message. It first checks that if there is a report that already exists, then I use that variable to actually check if it exists here. So append lets you append to an existing spreadsheet, and write overwrites everything and creates a new spreadsheet. So that's why I have to check if the Excel file already exists. And this is for just logging. And that's the catch of the process. So if I get into the process here, I'm actually going to open it locally because it's really big and it's laggy on the VM. So process, it invokes this format file. Format is where it pulls all the data from the input files, like I showed earlier. So it pulls every data field and puts it in a dictionary, so I can use that data in the process. And that get files here. I don't get files format, sorry. And that format files is here. And all it does is split. It gets the file first, gets the data, and then it splits by the line breaks. Open it up. Splits by the line breaks, as you see. And then I just loop through each of those line breaks and then get the data and assign it to the key. So what I do is there's a thing called fields list, like I shown in the runbook, which is here. This stuff is retrieved from, this list is retrieved from the init all settings file that I showed earlier, where it just gets the config file and gets this file as well. And all it does is put it in a list. And what I do is I loop through this list and assign the field to the element, which is from the data file. And it should match, and that means it needs to match sequentially perfectly. So this has to match the first field in the fields file, the second one the same way. And it continues on, and it does this for all the fields. And then once all the fields are done, it outputs a case dict, which is just a case dictionary. So it's field and then the element, which is the data. So field data. And I can use all that data in the process, which I'll open up again. So that was format. After it formats the data, I'm ready to move the file to the processed folder, because I don't want it to run again in case, like if it stays in there, it's going to run it again. So I don't want it to run again. So I'm moving the file to a process file. And if there is an error, then that's okay later on, because I've already moved the file, so it won't run it. Because I don't want to stick this at the end, because if there's an error, it doesn't get ever to this, then the file will never get moved, and it'll just keep going over and over. So I don't want to do that. So I'll put it in the beginning. I just assign two fields, which is case ID, PA number. I just use these a lot, so that's why I did that. But you can always just use get it from the case dictionary. So this is where all the meat happens. So I put this on the try catch as well. Just catch any errors in here. So there's two sides to it. This add side, which checks for if there's a PA number or not, and then this update side, which if there is a PA number, it goes here. So I'll do the add side real quick first. First of all, just real quick, it's all under, each add and update side is all under this terminal session. When I initialize the applications and create the MMIS system, or create the login and open up terminal, I save the terminal session in this variable, so it keeps using the same exact terminal. So it doesn't have to find it and open it again. It's already logged in, everything's used. So I use the same session, the whole process, so it'll never like mess up that way. So I use that, and then I run through the process. So this is the add process. There is no PA number. So I just initialize the PA number that we create as not available. So these two things are just, so if I've already run through the process a couple times, I've run through this, if I've run through multiple files in one process, sometimes there's an error at the end of a case file, which is like correct highlighted or something like that, and it doesn't get to the correct page where I begin again. So I check to make sure that action code : exists, which only exists on the page that we need to be at. And if it doesn't, I have to make a pop-up for the reviewer to actually get back to that page. This is just a fail-safe in case it doesn't ever get back to this correct page. And then, so this is where I actually start entering data. So we put in A, which is add type. These terminal data entries, there's two types. This type is the one where it checks for, I'll actually open up the activity. So this one is where it's set field. So it looks for this string in the terminal, starts at this number after this field. So 1 space after action code colon. And then this is for before. So after action code, before authorization type, 1 after action code. Put in A. And then it'll put an A at the right place. And then I'll actually really quickly show you how you actually get that field and position. So if you open up a terminal session, I have a test file just to like do this. It's Rocket Blue Zone. I open up MMIS here, press OK. It'll open up MMIS, and what it does is you can actually set the field based on what you actually see on the system, and then it'll automatically create those activities. It'll automatically save what fields are before and after, and then you can put in whatever data you need. So for example, here, let's say I set this field. I put my space here, my click here, set text, set field at position. I just put in this string. Is it going there? Sometimes it doesn't show up, but it still works. So if I press save and exit, as you can see, it does it automatically. So this one, I did a position one, which is row column of the whole window. And then it puts in this. This is what I usually use. The one I showed you is where it's set field. That's different, but they both do the same function. It's just two different ways of doing it. Looking for a string and putting it at a position after the string, or just putting it based on the position itself, just a row and a column. I think this is the better way and easier way to do things. And then all you do is change whatever you want here, and then you use this in the process if you ever need to add it or change anything. So this was a field one where it does this field string. So it's an add. This is to put in the authorization type. And then because this is an add, sometimes the PA number is populated, and we need to clear that because there's no PA numbers in the add side. So I clear that with just spaces. And then, so this is where I first get unique to the case type. So this is a switch. So based on the authorization type, if it's an H case here, for example, it'll go in here. I do this because each case type is different. So recipient ID, put in the member ID. And remember this case dict is from that format file that we used, where it opens up a text file and puts all the fields in this case dictionary. Puts in member ID. Puts in date of birth, for example, and I basically have every single entry of data in a try catch, with a throw in it or not a throw. So if there's no throw in it, that means that the field is optional and I don't have to enter data, which is okay. And the reason why I put in try catch is if there's no data to be entered, your UiPath will throw an error because it tries to enter data, but there's no data. So I'd make sure to put a try catch. But if it is a required field, I put a throw. I throw a business exception, unable to put in date of birth. This would happen if date of birth is empty or we're not on the right field, we're not on the right page with the field to enter into. And then this is all specific to the case. So physician NPI number, diagnosis code. As you can see, this is optional, so I don't have a throw in here, but this one is not optional, so I do have a throw in here. So supplies, same way. I'm going to go through these really quickly. It's all the same. Okay, so this part is important. So after we get through that first switch, I put in this, well, actually, before I finish the switches, I put in an NPI number, which is the location specific number. And this number helps MIS determine what location or what hospital the case is located for. But this location can have, or this number can have many locations, multiple locations that the bot has to choose from. So I enter in the MPI number, press enter, and then I get the whole page. And I put this in a try catch, but I get the whole page as a string called check locations text. And this is important because I need to see if there actually is multiple locations or if it's fine with just the MPI number. So for example here, if the check location text contains this, which means there's multiple locations, and I have to go into this part where I actually select the location. So the page can have multiple locations. I mean, the locations can have multiple pages. So I have to loop through each page. And if it doesn't contain, cannot scroll forward, then that means that page is okay. And I haven't gone to the last page yet. So if there is more pages, I go into here. I just put this in a while. So once I get into here, I split the locations based on this thing called prov type. I do that because every location has a string called provider type, prov type, and it just puts it nicely one location at a time into this list. And I loop through the list. I check to see if there is a matching location based on the address line, provider type, and address line 2. If it does, then I found location. I make the counter 1 so we don't keep looping through those location pages. We found location, and then we set the location with an X. So this, I just had to do a little bit of math here because depending on what index of what location it is, I have to put the X at the right place. And there's 4 different places per page where I can put it because there can be 4 different locations on the page. And this is just to put the X in. And then if we never found the location, then that means that we just have to go to the next location page. I mean, if we never found location on that certain page, we have to go to the next page of locations, which is F8. And then this is where we actually at the end, if we get to the end and there's no locations left, then we have to put X in just to enter out of that. So we fake it, acting like we found a location. We just put X in, and then we throw an error saying no location found, and it'll press F6, which exits out of the case. But if we did find location, we just press enter twice to get back to the page before we choose a location. And then here's where the meat of the part is, where we're actually filling case-specific data, where it's like procedure codes, diagnosis codes, authorization statuses, so denied, approval, stuff like that. So this is for H. We put in reason codes, reviewer ID, stuff like that, discharge date. The reason why I do this, there's this little part here that was added on. This is for something called the category of admission. So if the discharge date, which is a field in case dictionary, exists, then I need to enter that into MMIS, but it's only available if I put in 03D in the category of admission first. It's kind of a hack that they have. So they put 03D in this field. Go back to that page where you can enter in discharge date. So it puts an admit date, discharge date, goes back, and then sets the category of admission cleared. Because we only put in 03D to get to this field. We reverse the 03D and make it cleared, and then we put in whatever is actually supposed to be in there. This is all in the SDD. And then we're done with H case for that, for this switch case. And then for M, it's the same thing, except for this part. So there are different line items where you put in procedure codes into MMIS, and it's important to loop through all of those and make sure they're all entered. So what I have to do is I have to loop through just the integers 24 up to 24, because there can be maximum 24. And if the next procedure code exists, then I do something, right? Because it's not empty. There's something to enter in. So I have to put in procedure code underscore index. And I do that because, let me see. Yeah, because procedure code 1, for example, procedure code 2, it all has an index, so 2, 3, 4, it goes up to 24. So I have to loop through and check and see if the next one exists. If it does, we have to go in here. For the M case, I check, there's 2 entries per page because that's just how M case is set as, and therefore if it's an even number for the index, then it's like at the top. If it's odd and there's a 1, then it's going to be at the bottom for each of that page. And I have to do that because the fields are at a different place. So for example, 7, this is row 14. So the same fields are at different places. So I have to see which side I need to do it on, top or bottom. If the index is more than 1 and it gets here, then I have to press F11 to get a new page of empty fields I can enter data in. And this is all the same as before. I enter all the data in. Sometimes it's optional, sometimes it's required, and then I get to the end. And then that's the M part. S is the exact same. The only difference is in S, I don't have to check if it's top or bottom because in S, each procedure entry is unique to 1 page. So there's only 1 per page. So I don't have to actually do 2 different ones. That's all the same. And then this is the same for all the cases. We're out of the switch statement now. So I save it, press F9, check for errors. If there's an error on the page, I have to throw an error or business exception. I put in the main status for the case here. This is the same place for each case, so I put it out of the switch statement. And this is where we get to the notes pages. So each case has 3 different pages for notes. One called DHS comments, one called recipient comments, and one called provider comments. And this is just to initialize how many characters we're going to submit each time, because 1 page has a maximum number of characters. So what I'm doing is I'm putting in and substringing each of the comments that we have, and if it exceeds 500 characters, then I cut the string, get the first 500, submit the first 500, create a new page, and put the next in. And it keeps going until there's no more comments left to enter for each of the pages. So DHS comments, recipient, provider, and that's what this is. So if there's any comments left, then enter it in. But this is just a while statement. Let me see. This is a while statement. If there's any more comments left, then get the substring. So length substring 500. So get the first 500s, enter in the 500, and then keep going. Same thing for provider, it's exactly the same. And then recipient is the same thing. So press F9, check for any errors. If there's a cannot scroll forward error, So this is the part where edit codes are checked for, and that's at the bottom of each case at the end. And we do this to check if there's any prohibited errors that we need the reviewer to look at. So this isn't a while. If there's no cannot scroll forward, that means there's more edit codes to look for. So then we check for these. So we get the codes, second code, third code, fourth code, because there's 4 on each page. And then I append it to the string just to have a huge list at the end of edit codes. And then I click this plus sign, and then I press F8 to get to the next page of edits. And I keep doing this. And then once I get to this part where this cannot scroll forward exists, then it'll get out of this. And this part I just do in case there's an error on the case, then the reviewer has to do something. And this is the part where if there's a 438 code for the supply cases, then we just go in here. And then we put in 430. This part is all in the STD. We do this because specifically for 438 supply and approval cases, it has to all be true. It puts in the specific 430 in this field, and this happens because it goes cents and pricing, I think it's called, and that's only specific to these conditions. And then because of this, I also have to go back and loop through every line item in the supply cases and then put in a suspend for them because they're not approval anymore, they're sent to pricing. And then we get to this part where it's if it's a denial or an E, which is no action, then I don't do anything. But and it's okay if the edit codes are prohibited. But if it's an approval or suspended or anything else, then I loop through the edit codes to make sure nothing is prohibited. If I find a prohibited edit code, then I have to put the case in suspend, save it, and then say prohibited edit code found, please check the case. And the user will press yes or no to continue or not to continue. This part is just to create an output file for the new PA number. So like I said, every add case has a new PA number. And then if it's successful and the bot submits the case, then it creates a new PA number, and then it saves the PA number, gets text, saves the number. And this is just to check if there's an error again. I'm gonna have these sprinkled around where this would come up just to make sure we don't get stuck by it. So it gets the PA number. As you see here, this activity is a get text. It looks the same as setting field at position, where it gets the row, the column, and the number of indexes you want to look at from the start of the row and column. And the 11 is the number of digits that PA number has. So it gets the PA number, saves it as a text file, saves it here. Oops. So this is the file that it creates, PA number _ day, and it creates this. This is for like later in the process. I think KeyPro uses. And then this is the same as we've seen earlier in that catch statement, but this is for a successful run. Builds the data table, adds the row, checks and sees if the Excel already exists, then it appends the row. And then I have it all under a try catch. If it catches an error, press F6 to get out of the case. Logs all the fields, so it puts so what I do here, because it's in a catch, I have to save it in the exception, the codes, so I can put it in the log file of the exception in that main framework part. PA number, ID, edit codes. Same thing for system exception. The above was a business exception here. And then update is basically the same. I'm not going to go through it because we're not running out of time. It's literally the almost exact same. The difference is there's various differences, but the nuances is if there's a throw or not, if it's required field or not required field, it'll enter the PA number, for example, here. The structure is very similar, so it's very easy for you to understand. Like remember, loop through the 24, enter the fields in. The update side has more fields than the add side. It has reason codes, for example, but it's all pretty much structured similarly. So I'm not going to go through this. Sorry, that was a lot. Do you have any questions, or you want me to go through anything again?
No, it's basically straight. It's pretty. Well, I'm hearing my feedback here. I'm like say it's basically straightforward. Basically, just trying to enter the information into the application and finding where the location is on the application itself. So yeah, like I said, it's straightforward. It's not that bad.
Cool. Sounds good.
Yeah. Question though about this is the file. Is there a test environment basically in MMIS that if I had like a temp file that can be export, that can import it and see if it works?
No. So that's one of the big problems that we've had. There's no test environment. So one thing that you will have to change in the future is, I will find it real quick. 1 second. So to combat that, I have a pop-up before it submits the case. I'm trying to find it real quick.
David,
click OK for bot to submit. So I have this just because we don't have a test environment and we were in UAT. So before the bot submits anything, this pop-up will come up. And then if you want to, if you're testing, you can press F6 in MMIS. It'll exit out of the case, not update anything. And that's kind of the test that I've been doing. And it doesn't actually submit anything. So
Okay.
that's what I've been
Just take
doing.
that out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you might have to remove this later because they want the bot to move fast. So you don't want the reviewer to have to press OK every time. That's something you might have to change. Yeah, that answers your question.
Okay. How long does the process run?
Depends on the case, depends on what fields enters. I will send you videos of the bot actually running, and you can see for yourself there. I think it's about maybe like 45 seconds per case, I think, not accounting for if there's an error and the reviewer has to do something. If it's just successful, it's about 30 to 45 seconds, I would say.
Per case. And how many cases do they submit? Like 1,000, 2,000?
I think it's, I have it in the run book. Let me check. Oh wait, this is your run book. Sorry, Kayla. Right here.
Did you list the location where I can find this? Or is it out somewhere in the cloud in some environment?
Oh, you mean all the files?
Yeah, what you just the bot file. That you
Yeah,
sent.
it's on my VM. I'll package it up and send it to you.
Okay.
It's also on Rachel and Arlene's machine right now, and it's in Orchestrator, but I will package it up. I'm not sure if you're gonna have a license to like download it from Orchestrator and connect to Orchestrator and run it yourself. I'm not sure about that, but you could do that too later if you get a license. But I will
Okay.
package it up and send you all the code.
Okay, perfect. And then, like I said, where it runs this bot, it's a separate machine that we just RDP in and basically just run the bot from there.
So it's run from Rachel's and Arlene's machine right now. I have this VM and Kayla's VM has access to running. I'm not really sure. You might have to ask someone on Keypro side about that, about like what machines they can run it on besides those I've just mentioned. But I'm not sure.
Because I would assume it would have MMIS because it has to write the stuff to it. So okay. I'll find out. See.
Okay.
Machines are there. No, and like I said, just have to take a look at the file and go through it all again myself. But yeah, it's just a lot of for while catch loops and everything else and formatting data. So yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, David, just real quick. There is a MMIS test environment, but we have not been given credentials for it.
Okay.
John Hennessy had talked to Joe Schwartz, and they had talked to somebody named Camille, I think who's with the state. And for whatever reason, it never came to fruition. So, but there is an MMIS test environment. We just haven't been given access to it. So we've been doing everything in prod and watching it go through the system. So if something does error out, they can fix it.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool. Do you have an account at MMIS? Or
No,
are you using the one that was set there?
Rachel's.
Okay.
Yeah, they never got the MMIS account set up for them.
Okay.
That was on my issues list from very beginning, and it never happened. So we just used was it Rachel's ID you were using, I believe?
Both, yeah.
Right.
Okay. Cool.
Cool. Anything else?
Not much. Again, if you package that up, I'll download it. I'll go through it, everything else. And again, if I go through the code and everything else and go through the processes, have any questions, I'll just read it out to you and we can go through this again.
Yep. Okay, cool. I'll let Kayla take over then.
Okay.
Are you there, Kayla?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute talking.
Cool, you can start. Thanks, David.
Okay, thank you.
Larry, do you want to drop? I don't know if you drop if it's gonna disconnect the call. Oh, we did. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So. So everything is, I actually just sent you a zip file that contains all of this. These VMs are kind of slow, so it takes a second for this to load.
Kayla, is this something that, new that you just sent that I need to pull down, or is it something I've already got?
It's just the code files.
Okay.
But it is new. I haven't sent it out to anybody.
Okay, I'll stick this out in the.
And so this process is importing into KeyPro system, right, Trezzo? Were you going over?
Technically, no. Technically, it just extracts data from MMIS.
You're this process. Okay.
Yep. So the import is going to be done through a script or something on KeyPro side. So the first thing that it does is it's going to read the config file, which is this init all settings. Let me pull up the config file here so we can take a look. So this config file houses pretty much all the important information that the robot needs. The first one is what credential to use to log into MMIS. We either have access to Rachel's or Arlene's. If we need to use Arlene's, it's just MMIS Arlene instead of MMIS Rachel. This next part here is the connection string to connect to Blue Zone. One important thing to note on this is that the only thing that should really be updated is this profile setting. And that does use JSON format. So a backslash needs to be a double backslash. And then this other part here. So the MMIS action code C is what removes the items from the queue. When I was developing, I used I, which is basically just the read-only version. But to actually make it go live, we switched it to C. So probably when you're debugging, it might be a good idea just to change that to I. I guess I already had it up. Okay, so the first thing that happens is it runs through main. It's going to grab the config settings here. And then if we do have config settings, like it was able to read the config file correctly, then we open up this main flow, which houses pretty much everything that the robot does when it comes to the actual process. So the first thing is it's going to get the credential from Orchestrator, and then this is just passed in through that config setting here. And then this was something that I added later on that it kind of came up that if the output Excel file is open, the robot will error when it tries to write to that file. Like all Excel files need to be closed in order for the automation to run. Well, not all, but any Excel files that are associated to the automation need to be closed. So what I do here is I just check to see if that file is open or not. And in order to do that, I just read cell A1 and it'll error if the file's open, because then it's not going to be able to do this activity. So if that were the case, then we're going to get into this catch, and then I have it throw an error that just basically says the bot has found that the Excel report is open, and then just to close it, and then rerun the automation. But this really doesn't play any part of the automation itself. It's just a check to make sure that the automation is able to complete. So the next part here is the actual MMS portion or MMIS portion. I had to lump it all together because it all uses the terminal activity. And once this terminal session is over, it disconnects. So the first thing is the login. I have this check to make sure we're on the right screen once the MMIS session opens. So I have it read the text on the screen, and then this if. So if it contains this text here, then that's good. We're on the right screen. So the robot actually did open MMIS, and then if it doesn't, we're going to throw an error, and then that'll end the process. So these next couple things are just a few items that you have to run through within MMIS to get it to actually log in and use the right profile. So yeah, here it's typing in the username, and then down here's the password. The password comes in encrypted, but we have to decrypt it in order to send it to MMIS, so it knows how to read that password. So that's what this does here, is it just decrypts it, and then we send it to MMIS in order to log in with the decrypted version of the password. And then after we sign in, I just make sure that we actually are signed into MMIS, that there weren't any errors after that. So I have it read the text on the screen. And then if we see this sign on OK, then that's good. That means we're logged in. And then if not, we're going to throw an error. And then there's another text that we have to set to actually confirm the user account or something like that within MMIS. It just types that text. And then there's one part here that we ran into later on in development. There's between Rachel's and Arlene's credentials, they have different security permissions within MMIS. So there's one screen that will appear for Arlene that doesn't appear for Rachel. So this right here just scrapes the text on the screen. And then if it contains this text, then that means we're actually logged in as Arlene's account, and there's just an extra click that we have to do. And then if that doesn't happen, then we don't have to do anything. And then after that, everything is the same for Arlene and Rachel's account. So this is just setting up how we get to the case items. And then this next section here, I have it in a for each. So if we pull up the config file, it's going to look at this MMIS queue item number list. So these are the numbers that the robot's going to run through and pull the cases from each of these queues. So we have the 583 queue and the 582 queue. And it's going to run through the 583 queue first, because that's what I have first in the list, and then it's going to run through the 582. So this part here is where we type the queue number into MMIS. And then I have it do a check to see if there are cases. So this queue item exists is set to false. And then we're going to read the text here. And if for some reason there's no items within that, like 582 queue or 583 queue, this text is going to appear. This is no authorizations exist for the suspense location data entered. That just means there's no items in that queue. So then we just want to move on to the next queue, which is either the 583 or the 580, or I guess it would be the 582. So you would have already run through the 583. But if we do find the text, then we have queue items. And if we do have queue items, then we're going to run through actually extracting the data. So that's what this flowchart is here. So there's 1, 2, 3. I think there's 4 different screens that the robot interacts with within MMIS. So the first one is where we grab some information, like it has the recipient ID, the recipient first name, last name, and a few other fields. I have everything that the robot extracts within a try-catch. And the reason for that is if for some reason that field is missing within MMIS, because some of these don't have to be there, but they are, we want to extract it. And if that's the case, the robot's going to error. Something to do with the way it reads that field in the terminal session. If there's not actually text there, it's going to throw an error. And then we just have it in the try catch just to handle that. And then for each of these, if it's not able to extract that field, then I just set it to blank. So that's the same for all of these. Just set it to blank. Yeah, so these are all just grabbing different fields. So we have the date of birth, whatever this curlock is that we had to extract, authorization number. Oh, okay. And then one other thing with the authorization number, there's spaces in between the authorization number. So I have this replace the space. Oh, wrong one. Just replace the space with but nothing, because we don't want the spaces to be extracted. And then we have to hit enter to get to the next screen. So that brings us to screen 2. And then screen 2 is where we actually remove the item from the queue. So this part here, you're only able to type into this field if the status code is set to C. So in debugging, you want to make sure you comment this out, where it's going to throw an error. But basically what this does is it's going to type the queue number. So say we're on the 582 queue, it's going to type 582 plus the user's MMIS username. So we type that, and then we just hit enter to get to the next screen. So now screen 3, we just are extracting some more fields. I think these are all just field extractions. Okay, so then one other thing with this, there could potentially be more, I don't know if it's procedure codes or what exactly they are without looking at it, but if there's a plus sign on the screen, that means there's more information that the robot needs to grab that's not visible on that page. So if there is a plus sign, which right here is where we're able to get that plus sign text. So if that value comes back and it's not null or empty, then we know that we have more information we need to get. Okay, so these are all still just getting information. And now I have this if statement here. So if the plus sign exists, then we need to go to page 2. Okay, so yeah, it is the procedure code of the procedure code. So in order to do that, we have to hit F8. So the robot does that, and then it's just extracting some more information that's only visible on that page if there's multiple procedure codes. And then hit F7 to go back to the previous page to get us back on track where we need to be. And then if there's an order NPI number, which there should be, but if for some reason there's not, we're going to move on to the next step. But the order NPI number, we have to click on that order NPI number and extract more information. So we just set the cursor over the order NPI field, and then hit F4, which brings us to a new page, and then we're able to extract that information. It's like the attending provider name, the type, and a few other fields, the address. And then it's the same thing for the provider number. So if the provider number exists, then we need to set the cursor on the provider number, which is this part here, and then hit F4, which takes us to another page, and we're able to extract that data as well. So the last screen that we interact with is the screen 4, which has the diagnosis codes. So again, we're just extracting these values. And then this part here is where we check to make sure that all the required fields are there. So this error string I initiate to blank. That's going to house what fields are missing. So it only gets written if there are fields that are missing. And then same with this Boolean that I have, missing fields error is only going to be set to true if a required field is missing. So most of the dates come in right, except for the procedure code 1 start date and procedure code 2 end date. So we have to do this date parse function in order to get it in the right format. And then same with the end date. Oh, okay, I guess it is procedure code 2. It just doesn't come in the right format. And then one other thing, I have trim on the end of all of these strings, because sometimes when it extracts it from the terminal session and adds a few spaces, I'm thinking they're just there to make up for the gap that's left in that field. So we just want to make sure we trim that. And these are all just getting the date in the correct format. So formatting all these dates. And then some of these aren't required fields, like there doesn't have to be a procedure code 3. So first I just need to check that a value was extracted in order, or actually before we try and parse it out. So there's 4 different dates that we would deal with, proc 1, proc 2, proc 3, proc 4, and they all have a start date and an end date. So that's just all of these. They're all identical, just dealing with different variables. And now these are the required fields here. So if the recipient ID isn't extracted, then we're going to set this error string saying that the member ID is a missing field, set this to true. And then I also log it that the MMIS queue item is missing the member ID. And that's the same for all of these. So same with the first name. So if we don't get the first name, we just want to set the error string. And these are going to keep compiling on top of each other. So I have this if string is null or empty, then we're going to set it to that text. Whereas if it already has a value, then we paste that value and add the new missing field on top of that. Yeah, so all of these are the same again, just dealing with different variables. So the date of birth. We have the authorization number, the order MPI. So all of these are just the required fields. There are more fields that get extracted, but these are the ones that we have to extract. And if one of these is missing, then something has happened within MMIS. And a lot of times it's human error. Like there was a case a couple days ago that the first name and last name just weren't there. And I guess it had to do with how somebody inputted that data. Okay, here, so I have, I just log what fields are missing along with the authorization number. That way we know what record, I guess, is quote unquote bad. And then if everything looks good, then it has all the required fields. And then we add this data row to a data table, and it just contains everything that we need. So it has all of those fields that we extracted. So if there's a missing field error, if there's not a missing field error, which is good, then we're able to submit that case by hitting F3. But if for some reason there is a missing field error, like that one instance where we didn't have a first name or last name, we need to go back and re-add this to the queue. So you have to hit enter, I think it's 7 times. Yeah, okay, you must hit enter 7 times to go back to the second screen. So we do that, we just hit enter 7 times. And then there's that one part where we added the queue number, so like the 582 plus the user ID, we have to remove that. So I move the cursor there, and then this control key removes the text from that field. And then we hit F3, which will bring us to the next case without actually removing that case. And then this last one here, since we are in a loop, we just need to make sure that there are more cases within that queue number. So this just scrapes the text on the screen, and then if there are more items, then we keep going, and if there's not, then we break out of this loop. So that's it for the MMIS part. This section here is where we create the output file. So first we need to check to see if the file already exists. And then this build data table. I have every field in here that is going to be needed for that output text file, which looks like this here. So see these headers up here. The headers only need to appear on the first line, and then everything else after that is just what's extracted from the robot. So this part here is where I do that. I get the all of the columns and add them to a list, and then I take the column names and split them with that pipe symbol, which is this. So it just basically takes all of the column headers, turns them into a list, and then I separate that list out into a string using pipes. And then for each record that we added to that report file data table, which is what we get from MMIS, we only add records to that text file if it doesn't have any errors. So we just need to check if that has error columns as true or false. And if it's false, which is good, we can add it to the text file. And if not, then we don't want to add it. So we have another data table that I created to house the ones that don't have errors, which is this loop here. So within that, I do the kind of the same thing. I take that whole row and turn it into an array and separate that array into a string using the pipe symbol. And then I add it to an output text, which is just a string that compiles on top of each other. And then this part here, so if the file exists, then that means it was already run for the given day, and we want to read the text file. So if somebody were to run this multiple times a day, it needs to continue to append to the bottom. Whereas if it's the first time it's running, then we can just create a whole new file. So that's a little bit easier to explain. So, and then there's a weirdness too with data tables. It only creates the column names if there's data in that data table. So I have it read the output text file, and if there is text, then that's good. Whereas if there's not, then we can just append the data right into that file already. So let's see. If the output file is not empty, then we want to paste the current output file along with all of the new output file that or the new output that we generated, which is the output file text. So what happens is if you run this and there's no items with the MMIS, within MMIS, this file still needs to be generated, but it's going to be blank. So this whole thing is just not going to have any information. So we just want to make sure we don't add these column headers twice. So we just need to check to see if there's already text in here or not. If there is text, then it's assumed that the first line is always going to be the column headers, where if there's no text, then we can just add them in. So that's that whole part. And then this last section is a little bit easier. It's just we're writing an Excel report. And it looks like this. So the biggest thing to look for in this report is this section here. So this has error. If it sets a false, then everything's good. If it sets a true, then that means one of these required fields is missing. And then this will get populated here with what fields are missing. But this is always going to have every single record within MMIS, whether it was successful or not. So first we need to check if it exists. And if it doesn't exist, that's good. We can just write the range and move on. But remember how I was saying that the columns don't get generated unless there was data within the data table. So the first thing we want to do is read cell A1. And if it's nothing, then that means the first time the robot ran, it didn't get any data. So then we can do a write range. Whereas if there's already value in cell A1, then we need to make sure we append the new records to the bottom. So then we're going to do an append range as opposed to a write range. And the last thing that I have is in this try catch here, I have it log the error. And every time that an error is thrown, it's going to get kicked back to this try catch here. And it's going to state this text. So an unexpected error has occurred and caught in the main flow. And then it's going to have this exception string here, which is what gets generated from those throw statements. So like here, if I drill into here. So this throw text is what's going to appear in that system.exception from before. So that's pretty much it. I know it's a lot to take in, but do you have any questions?
No, it's just straightforward. I just can't believe how archaic MIS you guys have to do all these bots for it to pull data out and put data in.
Right.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But that's not that bad. It really is. It's like I said, just UiPath, and the way you guys have it all flow out, it's very easy to follow.
Yeah. Now, did Larry use the framework? Did he mention anything with that?
We showed a little bit of it, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I didn't use the framework. This process really wasn't complex enough to have to try and like piece together how the framework is laid out. Mm-hmm. So I just created my own flow, which is working fine.
Okay.
But Larry loves to use the framework.
Now, question with this. So, I talked to Lisa, my boss, and everything else. She mentioned there's a third process where they take that and put it into the Kepro system. Did you work on that, or?
No.
No.
Yeah, I don't know. I know Kepro is doing that. I don't know how or what or when.
Okay, so it's probably not through UiPath. It's probably another method or something.
Right,
okay.
That's my assumption.
Okay. Cool. And then you said you sent me the files for this, correct?
Yeah, I sent it through the Kepro email.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm just
I never get on
now.
There. Okay, cool.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's all
okay.
good.
Same thing, true. If I'll download it, upload it, and everything else, go through it. If any questions, I'll just reach out to you.
Okay, cool. That sounds like a plan.
Yeah, but this is great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, well, I'll talk to you later then.
Thank you. This also, but before you go, Larry had this set to record, so do we get like a link? This is my first time using Teams, so I'm not too sure how this works.
Oh, I didn't record this.
Oh no, he had.
No, it's still recording.
It's
Oh,
still
it is?
recording.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Then yeah, so I think what happens is after we hang up, it's gonna generate a file. It might take a few minutes though,
Okay.
and then I'll have to figure out how to send that over to you guys.
Yeah, I just
but-
didn't want this to be lost. I'm like, no, we recorded all
Yeah.
this. It's all gone.
Right, I'm glad you hit record. 'Cause I like didn't think about that. So.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, I'll once that file is generated, I'll send it your way, or put it somewhere in a link or something.
Okay, great. Well, thank you much.
Cool. Yeah, no problem.
Kayla, just if you don't care, just send it to me and I'll store it on our SharePoint.
Gotcha. Okay, we'll do.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay. Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye.